wait. There's Bryce, you got a quorum.
Bryce. Okay, cool. All right. Well, all right. Let's. It's 6 o'clock by my watch, so let's get this meeting going. This is City Council work session for October 5th, 2020. A roll call, please, Sue.
Councillor Finley will be absent. She's on vacation. Councillor Yarnell Holloman. Okay, not seeing her. Councillor Cofield.
Present.
Councillor Martinez Plancarte.
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Present.
Councillor Bacon.
I am here.
Okay. That's
Lisa's walking in the door right now.
your door?
Not my door.
There, that door.
Oh, the virtual world.
The virtual door.
Okay, and I will mark Councillor Yarnell Holloman is here. I was just saying I didn't hear a knock.
All right, so we are all somewhat accounted for.
You are ready to go.
There we go. All right. Council agenda and meeting, anything to add or any comments regarding the agenda and meeting, the business portion? Okay, hearing none. What about business items? Any items on the business side of things? Council business items. All right, hearing none.
I did have a question, and I don't know where the right place to ask the question is, but I was wondering if we had an update, and I may have totally missed it, on, remember when the Wolves and People, $30,000 that we were going to take out to do a grant process right before Patrick left? I just wondered if we had, if we as counselors were supposed to do any action items around that?
I don't think that was, I guess Patrick proposed it as the council taking lead on that, but I'm not sure that we put any meat on that. And so I think we can take a lead on it if you'd like from the staff perspective. I guess bottom line, I think that item was dropped, at least for the moment, in terms of priorities and other things, because we don't have, except for that amount of money, we don't really have a grant program, so we'd have to stand one up.
Does that help, Elise?
So we'll just leave the money there then?
I mean, at this point, we certainly can go through the effort of giving it out, and that's probably a good thing, I guess, from an economic standpoint, but it's also one of those things we can fold it into the budget and have it as part of our proposal for the actual budget cycle next year. I mean, it's a little bit your pleasure, and you know, I may warn you on staff time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else for council business? All right. Hearing none, let's go on to item 5A, the watershed and stormwater management presentation. I think we've got Brett and Kristen this evening. So good evening, folks.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right, well, I guess if there's no further commentary, I can go ahead and take this away. Can you all hear me? Just confirmation. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep,
Yes,
I think
okay.
so. I think we're good.
Perfect. Okay, good. Here we go. All right. So my name is Kristen Svakarovich, and I am a civil engineer with the City of Newberg. And tonight I'll be giving you a presentation about our city's watershed and stormwater management policies. Slide. So tonight we'll be going over a little bit of the watershed and stormwater history. We're going to talk about today's stormwater requirements, challenges implementing some of those requirements, and then next steps moving forward. And Brett will kind of take over that next steps part of the presentation. So slide. So this is a map of the City of Newberg's watersheds. And so we have 3 main watersheds within the City of Newberg. You've got Chehalem Creek on the west side of town in green. Hess Creek in the middle of town in yellow, which runs through George Fox, and Springbrook on the east side of town, which runs through the golf course if you've been over there. And then for those of you who are not aware, Chehalem Creek the word Chehalem is actually a Kalapuyan word. The Kalapuyan are the indigenous people of this place in the Willamette Valley. And Chehalem actually means the outside place. And what's cool about Kalapuyan dialect is that CH is actually sort of a place name notifier for Kalapuyan words. So the CH means the place of. So Chehalem is the outside place, whereas Champui, the state park means the place to dig yampa root. And I kind of tie that back to this watershed and the watershed and stormwater presentation, because oftentimes the word Chehalem is disassociated from the Kalapuyan people in the same way that stormwater is often disassociated from watersheds as a whole. People think of watersheds in sort of this natural, beautiful system that conveys water. And then we think about stormwater and we think about sort of this pipe network, but really they're the same system. The watershed conveys stormwater. The stormwater is part of the watershed. So it's really all the same thing. But oftentimes they do get disassociated, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. Slide. So when did we really start caring about the water and our watersheds in the United States? It really kicked off around 1972 with the Clean Water Act. Prior to that, we had rivers that often caught on fire on the East Coast in the middle of the country. There was so much pollutant in those rivers that they would catch on fire. They'd be on fire for days at a time, and then they'd have to be put out. And so that was sort of a line in the sand for the Environmental Protection Agency, and they took measures to ensure that we had clean water and that we protected that resource. So there's a lot of work that happened between 1972 and 2000, but in 2000, the Environmental Protection Agency directed the state of Oregon to essentially create water quality standards through what is called a TMDL plan, or total maximum daily load. So those are the water quality standards. So the state of Oregon created state law around TMDLs. They created the TMDL rule. And in 2006, the city of Newberg was required to begin down this path of creating our own TMDL. And our own TMDL was adopted in 2008. And I will talk a little bit more about our own TMDL here shortly. So, slide. So in the city of Newberg, we have our three watersheds, Chehalem Creek, Hess Creek, and Springbrook, and they are part of the greater watershed, which is the Willamette River watershed. The Willamette River watershed is actually broken up into a couple different subbasins. We're in the middle Willamette River. And I like this quote about sort of the purpose of that TMDL plan and those water quality standards. And this is coming from the Department of Environmental Quality. And it says, the Willamette River and its tributaries support a wide variety of ecosystems and support native fish, wildlife, and aquatic life that are culturally and economically significant to the basin. So when people think about coming to Oregon and perhaps having some cuisine that is very Northwest representative, salmon often comes to mind. And so when we think about salmon in relation to the Willamette River, the commercial harvest value of salmon in the Columbia River fishery, which the Willamette flows into, is worth about $4.1 million. So there's really, that economics is a huge part of the reason why we're doing the work that we do around watersheds. But there's also that cultural component. And so culturally, salmon is the primary food source for the indigenous people of this place. It is caught, it is eaten, it's preserved, it's protected. And in the community belief structure, it's said that when the salmon cease to exist, the people of this place will also cease to exist. So it really, we think about stormwater and it's sort of the nuts and bolts of having to figure out how do we treat and detain the stormwater, but we have to look at it sort of as a whole and really understand both that cultural and economic significance of what it is that we're doing. Slide. So as I stated, we're in the middle Willamette Valley Subbasin, and our pollutants of concern are temperature, bacteria, and mercury. So temperature is about making sure that our river temperatures are low enough that it can support salmon rearing and spawning habitat. Bacteria really has to do with E. coli and making sure that we don't have high concentrations of E. coli entering the Willamette that would can get people sick, those sorts of things. And then mercury is sort of probably one of the more elusive pollutants, but it's one that is really significant because in high concentration loads, actually we end up with fish consumption advisories on the Willamette River. So when we talk about salmon being this cultural and economic importance, and all of a sudden now we have mercury pollution and we can't actually eat that fish due to advisory consumption or consumption advisories, that becomes a huge problem. Slide. So the city of Newberg, as I mentioned, we have our own TMDL plan, which actually fits in sort of the larger Willamette TMDL plan. So all TMDL plans that cities administer throughout the Willamette Basin primarily have these 7 best management practice areas. And each one of these areas is broken down into strategies and then measurable goals. And so in total, we have 54 measurable goals that are related to our TMDL plan. And we report on those goals and the progress that we're making annually to the Department of Environmental Quality to show that we are doing the best that we can to reduce pollutants in the city of Newberg that eventually flows into the Willamette River. And a large part of what we do, what I will say, is the public outreach component. And so you'll see some pictures there. They're from Public Works Day. We did a cool project where we stamped stormwater lids on t-shirts for kids as part of Public Works Day. But again, it's about that education and making sure people understand. A lot of people don't realize that we have 3 creeks in town, that they flow into the Willamette, those sorts of things. So it's understanding that greater context. Slide. And with that greater context, I would say one of my biggest takeaways that I want people to take away from this presentation is that we do not have a combined storm and sewer system. And so I think a lot of people think that when it rains and the water flows along the curb line and it goes down a catch basin or inlet, which are kind of those 2 pictures there, the thought is that that water goes to the wastewater treatment plant and it gets treated before it gets discharged into the Willamette. And that is not the case. We have a separate system. Sewer gets treated, stormwater, and a lot of parts of our cities does not get treated. And a lot of the older parts of town, we actually don't have a robust stormwater system. And so our biggest impact as city employees, you would think to the watershed system as a whole, it's like, well, it's got to happen along the creeks. And I would say that our largest impact to the system actually happens along the curb line. And that happens because in rain events, you know, our streams start along the curb, and people don't think about that. You think about a stream starting in the headwaters, right, upstream. But during a rain event, it starts at the curb line. And so, you know, actions that we take, our Public Works Maintenance Department does a fantastic job with street sweeping, and we get pollutants up off the roadway before they actually enter our stormwater system. So we also try to do education around, you know, we put those markers out on the streets that say no dumping drains the stream, trying to get people to realize that, hey, this is not going to the wastewater treatment plant to be treated. Slide. So the development of the Stormwater Management Municipal Code really started in 2003 as a citizen-led effort before we actually got regulation that was sort of handed down to us through the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. So there's a group of folks who believed that we needed to be doing stormwater treatment before we were actually required to do that. And they sort of developed that code language and the associated design and construction standards back in 2003. In 2008, as part of the TMDL plan, we were directed to provide additional detail to those stormwater standards in the areas of erosion control, illicit discharge, and stormwater management. Slide. So these are the 3 areas that got added to some of that original language that was put together through that citizen-led effort. Erosion control is really thinking about construction site stormwater management. So you've got someone building a single-family home. We want to make sure that they've got silt fencing up. They've got protection around your stormwater outlet. So if all of a sudden in the middle of summer, rain comes down, we don't end up with a stream of mud going down the curb line, entering our stormwater system into the creeks and rivers. So erosion control measures was part of that. Illicit discharge and detection was another area where we now have regulation around. So it's illegal to dump into our stormwater system. There are enforcement and penalties around that. And then the last one is stormwater management, which is really sort of what we think about traditionally as like the detention, treatment requirements, designing the stormwater facilities, and those facility responsibilities. Slide. Let's see. Sorry, I'm losing my own place here. So like I said, that community-led effort back in 2003, 2004, the 2004 is when our design and construction standards were created. So you had the policy created, and then you had, following that, the design and construction standards got created. And what I think is really cool about this process is going back and doing the research is that the Citizens Committee, the people involved in this process, are part of our community today. So Mike Googler is a developer in town. Leonard Rydell is a civil engineer who continues to do design work in town. Clyde Thomas used to work at George Fox doing facility maintenance. And Larry Anderson used to be the city engineer for the city of Newberg. He's retired. But these are the group of people that really sort of spearheaded that effort. And they're involved in our community today. And so as stormwater best practice has continued to evolve, we have updated our design and construction standards along the way. So we had kind of that starting point, and then we have continued to evolve. And so right now, our stormwater design and construction standards primarily follow the City of Portland's, the Bureau of Environmental Services, and we also follow Clean Water Services, which is out in Washington County. And those are really the leaders in our region when it comes to stormwater. And so we look to them to try to emulate what it is that they're doing in our community. Slide. So you're going to see this slide twice. So we're going to touch on it here, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail in a few minutes. But I want to kind of give you some terminology before we get too far down this presentation. So when we talk about stormwater facility, as that's sort of like the big umbrella over stormwater as a whole. On the left side, you'll see regional facilities, and those are really not what we're going to be talking about tonight, but it's like a subdivision type application. So you're going to put in streets and a bunch of homes, and we would install a regional facility. What we're going to be talking about tonight is really the local facility application. And so we'll be looking at rain gardens, infiltration planters, and flow-through planters. And so everything on the right side oftentimes kind of gets thrown in one bag, and it's just called rain gardens. But we'll get into the details of why they're different and how they can be applied and used in our toolbox. Slide. So we think about stormwater and what are we really doing and when is it required? So in the city of Newberg, stormwater is required when on an individual site, you're creating more than 500 square feet of net new impervious surface. So that means if, let's say you had a site that had a home on it and you demolished that home and you're going to build another home, you're only going to treat for stormwater if you're creating more than 500 square feet of new impervious surface. So you get credit for that existing surface. You just are treating for new impervious surface. And so there's that 500 square foot threshold. And then you see there's a couple different thresholds in there. The middle threshold, if you're in that sort of impervious surface range, you can use a standard drawing that the city's developed, and we'll talk through that. And if you're beyond that, you're going to actually have to hire a professional engineer to help you with some stormwater design. And so when we talk about stormwater design, what are we doing? So it's really two-pronged. So we're detaining the stormwater, and then we're treating the stormwater. And so when we think about detention, you think about rain falling down on a vacant lot today that's maybe covered with grass. And when that rain hits the grass, it infiltrates into the ground, or if it's a really heavy rain, it may flow over the surface, but it's got a lot of grass and vegetation that's slowing that water down. And so our detention requirement is that post-development, so after you've developed a site, you cannot have stormwater leave that site faster than it would have pre-development. And we do that because we want to protect our stormwater system. If you have a huge influx of volume that is hitting our stormwater system, it means that we have to have bigger pipes downstream. It means that we're possibly eroding our streams and our rivers, downstream, because all of a sudden we have all of the stormwater that would have otherwise entered the system at a much different rate. And then there's the treatment aspect. And so treatment is sort of the same in detention, in that we want post-development to not be any worse than pre-development. And so a lot of the treatment requirements is actually done through computer modeling. And so we look at a variety of different pollutants and site conditions, and that gets modeled, and we look at that output, and we just make sure that post-construction is not worse than pre-construction for the amount of pollutants that are entering our stormwater system. Slide. So when we think about stormwater and implementing that treatment and detention standard, and we think about applying that to a single family residential lot, there are some implementation challenges. And one of those challenges is that our lot sizes have gotten smaller over time. So in 2010, our lot sizes changed for single family in R1 and in R2 and 3. So in R1, it went from 750 square feet down to 5,000 square feet, excuse me. And in R2 and 3, it went from 5,000 square feet down to 3,000. And so when you have smaller lot sizes, it just makes it more difficult to fit all of those design elements on a site. So in addition to lot sizes, we also have some mandatory offsets from property lines. So you can't put a stormwater facility closer than 3 feet to an adjacent property line. And that sort of is derived from the Oregon Drainage Law and also the building code. Slide. So other stormwater implementation challenges, we also have some requirements around a public utility easement. So at the front of your lot, behind your sidewalk, there is what is called a 10-foot public utility easement. And that space is available to allow for things like power, Comcast, gas. That's where those utilities go in. Those aren't public utilities in the sense that they're water, sewer, and stormwater, but they're public in the fact that they're providing a public service to the people in our community. And they have a dedicated space behind the sidewalk, which is why we don't want private stormwater facilities in that space. And on the right, you can see some examples of what those facilities look like above ground, but there's also infrastructure below ground. The building code is another can be a challenge sometimes. The stormwater facility can't be located closer than 3 feet to a building foundation. Otherwise, it needs to be a flow-through planter, and we'll talk about that. And then slope can also be another challenge depending on site constraints. So slide. So here's that slide again about stormwater terminology. And so we're going to talk about the right-hand side of the screen here. So rain garden is kind of in the bottom middle there. And that is a facility that really is primarily vegetation. You've got like a depression and you've got side slopes, and there's nothing like hard surface, like a concrete wall or block wall. Whereas an infiltration planter is in the lower right-hand corner, and that facility has got that, in this example, it's got a block wall that is decreasing the footprint of the facility, but there's some balance that goes along with that. And so those two on the bottom there, the water, when it goes in there, it infiltrates into the ground. Now, if you don't have the space to build either one of these facilities, you may have to put your facility closer to the building foundation, in which case we don't want water infiltrating into the ground in that case, because it could undermine the foundation. And so that's a flow-through planter. And so let's go to the next slide and we'll kind of take a look at what these details look like. So this is a rain garden design. And I talked about the city has a standard drawing available so that when residents develop single family lots, they don't actually need to hire an engineer, because we have standard details in place where you can use these sizing factors to figure out how big your rain garden needs to be. And we have standard details for how they need to be designed. So sizing factor for a rain garden is 0.045. If you assumed a 5,000 square foot lot and you assumed 3,000 square feet of impervious surface area, then your facility would need to be 135 feet, square feet. Sorry, let's see. And so with that, you think about that's the actual footprint in the basin. However, if you look at this detail, you have a 3-to-1-5 slope for that side. And so what actually ends up being is the footprint of that ends up being 570 square feet, which is a much larger footprint in the grand scheme of things. So if you said, Kristen, I don't have space for 570 square feet on my lot, then we could look at the next slide, which is an infiltration planter. And in this concept design, we don't have that 3-to-1-5 slope. What they're doing is they're installing a concrete wall or block system that creates vertical, a vertical side for that facility. And it really actually truly decreases the footprint. So now the footprint is really only 135 square feet versus really that 570 square feet, which is the one that we looked at previously. And again, these are infiltrating into the ground. And so these first two examples only work when your groundwater table, they won't work with a high groundwater table. So if your groundwater is too high, you can't infiltrate, it won't work. So there are some other design factors that are involved with choosing a facility. So if you say, I still don't have enough space to do this, Kristen, my lot is shallow, I need to be closer to 10 feet away from my building. In this example, the infiltration planter, again, it can't be closer to 10 feet to the building. So then we look at the next option, which is a flow-through planter. So slide. So of note, the sizing factor here is incorrect. It should actually be 0.06, which then makes the actual facility size 180 square feet. So this facility is a little bit larger, but it can actually be located closer to the building, which in some cases, that's what needs to happen depending on what your site constraint looks like. So what does this look like in practice? We're going to go through a couple examples here. So let's look at the next slide. So here is a single family residential lot on the left here. Originally it was one lot. It was partitioned into 2 lots. So the lot on the left is the new lot that was created. And the minimum lot size in R1, which this is zoned R1, is 5,000 square feet. In this case, this lot size is about 7,000 square feet. So it's a lot larger than the minimum lot size. And so they had the space to put in a true rain garden. They had the space to do that 5-to-1 side slope and make it work. But that's not always the case. So let's look at the next slide as another example of R1. And we're getting closer to that 3,000 square foot minimum lot, or sorry, 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. So that lot on the bottom is the lot that has been partitioned off from sort of the mother lot, which is their original lot. And in this case, they didn't have space to put in a rain garden. They didn't have space for that 5-to-1 side slope. So they did what is called an infiltration planter. And you can see it's kind of at the bottom of the screen there, and they used block walls, and it reduces the footprint of that stormwater facility. And when you look at that lot, there's not a lot of other places to put that facility if they didn't go with this type of design, because it has to be 10 feet away from the house, and it has to be outside of the public utility easement, which is 10 feet from the back of sidewalk. So now we're going to go and look at some R2 zoning, which is even smaller lot sizes. So on the left here, you can see kind of north and south are the kind of the original lot sizes. Let's see, I believe they're 50, look here, 50 by about 140. And that lot in the middle got split into 2 lots, and they built skinny homes. And so In this case, again, trying to figure out how to fit in that stormwater facility. And so this is an infiltration planter that got installed. It's 10 feet away from the building, and it's 10 feet away from the back of the sidewalk. And what you'll notice when you look at the aerial image is they actually had to shift the house backwards. So that northern house there is a little bit further offset from the curb in order to actually fit that facility, right? And so those are some of the design considerations you have to look at. So slide. So here's another example in R2. I brought this one up because it's a good example of stormwater design standards changing over time. So again, minimum lot size is 3,000 square feet, but in this case, the stormwater facility is actually built inside of that public utility easement. So that 10 feet behind the back of sidewalk. And so if, let's say, Comcast had a problem with their conduit and the wiring, or there was a problem with the gas line, if those sorts of repairs had to be made, you would actually have to dig up this facility and to make that repair, which is why generally we don't want any stormwater facility over the top of that public utility easement. It certainly, when you look at this concept, it could be done. It just wasn't a requirement at that time, so it wasn't. Slide. Let's see, make sure I'm doing okay for time here. So this, we talk about the evolution of stormwater design and it being kind of an art and a science. And so this is a subdivision application of stormwater design in the city of Newberg. And at this point in time, we required a stormwater facility on each lot to treat those new impervious areas that were being created. And what this becomes a challenge for the city when it's at the subdivision level is now we have a private stormwater maintenance agreement with every one of those property owners to maintain their stormwater facility. And so our preference is certainly now is the second concept design, which is the next slide, where here you have, very small lot sizes again, or I should say not very small, but smaller lot sizes. They range in size between 3,000 and 5,000 square feet. You certainly couldn't fit an individual stormwater planter on each one of these lots. And so what we end up doing is kind of the left side of that terminology diagram. And what you have in your upper right-hand corner is a regional facility. So that stormwater facility is treating all of the stormwater from all of those private houses and the street. And the city owns and maintains that facility, which gives us more control over how it's maintained, and we're not chasing down property owners to do maintenance on their facilities. Slide. So we kind of go back to stormwater management as an art and a science. So we have standard details that were created to help reduce the cost barrier for on-site single-family residential stormwater facilities. So we have those 3 tools in our toolbox. We have those sizing factors. It allows for anyone who is, anyone off the street can come and look at that detail and design a stormwater facility without having an engineering background or a degree, and it reduces the cost to development of stormwater facilities. But let's say that you don't like those details and you want to do something else. You're more than welcome to hire a professional engineer, and our code allows for that type of creativity. So you got an example on the right here that shows kind of a 2-stage rain garden. And we encourage that, if someone wants to take that extra step and hire an engineer and come up with something that's better suited for them and their site, we're more than welcome to review those types of design. So ultimately, our goal is to protect our watershed and the ecosystem it supports that are both culturally and economically significant. And so while sometimes stormwater is presented kind of as a price increase to affordable housing, we really need to take care of our watershed and treating that stormwater, because it really is a way to provide equity in affordable housing. Oftentimes, historically and marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by air and soil and water pollution. And so we need to take care of our watershed, and that needs to be seen as something that needs to happen. It needs to happen in the same process with affordable housing. It can't be stormwater or affordable housing. It needs to be both. And we need to figure out a way to make it happen together. So, Brett, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Now that Kristen's kind of described where we are, how the evolution has occurred with stormwater, I'll give a brief description of the steps that we're currently taking in this evolution process. Stormwater management has evolved and will continue to do so. It's a challenge to achieve a balance between the cost of the stormwater management best practices, those water quality facilities that Kristen was describing, and our protection of the natural resources. So the next steps that we'll be reviewing and updating the stormwater master plan and the design standards. We'll be looking for opportunities when doing so to align those changes or updates that we'll make there with council goals of DEI, along with housing affordability, and ultimately there's a good potential for an incorporation of stormwater management best practices into a sustainability program. Next slide. So the stormwater master plan update is looking to be completed in 2021, and we have scope in for the consultant to review regulatory requirements and then also for design criteria for potential updates to our design standards. Next slide. So as we are reviewing the public design standards, we're looking right now to address inconsistencies and provide clarifications to those standards. In the future, there's some potential updates that could occur after completing the stormwater master plan. And these would include revised design criteria, addressing regulatory requirements, and any changes to stormwater management best practices. And the intent in all of this is updating the design standards is to achieve a balance between the cost of the stormwater management practices, protection of the natural resources, and meeting regulatory requirements. So that's, next slide. And that brings us to questions.
And that's my cue. Questions, folks. And I think I have, if I can figure it out, the raise hand option here. So, or just wave, either way. Anyone? Oh, don't let me go first. All right, I'll do it. All right, so first, this full disclosure, my day job, I work for Newberg Area Habitat for Humanity. We build affordable housing, largely in infill lots, exclusively actually in Newberg for the last 25 years. Just for historic preference or historic basis, and Kristen, this probably predates you and Brett probably as well, but Habitat for Humanity was actually the first, as we know, the first residential builders that actually retained all stormwater on site. And the reason that happened was that our civil engineer at the time, Leonard Rydell, would only do the work for free if we agreed to do that. So we have been strong proponents forever and ever of retaining stormwater on site. All right, so that's my background comments. And as you said, it has evolved. Literally the first couple houses that we did, there were depressions in the ground that the drain pipes went into them, and there was not even an overflow originally. Then the next thing was we had to put in overflow that would flow to the street and through the weep holes. Most recently, this PUE thing has come to be something that's been enforced. And I will say that that makes it extremely difficult not to use cement cisterns in order to treat rainwater. So again, that's a question of sustainability as well, using additional cement when you could have used a depression in the ground. So my question is this, first question is, how often is the 10-foot PUE actually used by any of these service providers?
I can take that, and anyone else can join in. But I will say in all new residential developments, the public utility easement is used. In older parts of town, we require the public utility easement be dedicated as part of partitioning lots. And sometimes it is used, sometimes it is not. However, what I will tell you is that space, as lots become smaller, that space becomes exceedingly more valuable. because there are less places to put that infrastructure. And so being able to, bring gas to a part of the city that doesn't have it, or bring better communication services to a city that does, or part of the town that doesn't have it, if we don't have that space and we don't save that space, it's gone, and it becomes significantly more costly to install those facilities in parts of town where we don't have public utility easements.
Correct. Certainly I understand for new development, new subdivisions, I understand completely. But when it comes to infill lots in older parts of town where literally, the 10-foot public utility easement runs through the adjacent house, it's hard to understand that. And I think this is where I know I've heard from a number of builders in town that this is one of the criticisms, is this PUE. Because I think there should be or could be ways to do it so that either the utilities go lower in order to do it. Again, like I said, one of our projects here that we're currently doing had to completely change the stormwater plan because of that 10-foot PUE that we'd never encountered before, even though we'd built 30 houses. And so that's one that I would really hope you all might take a look at, that PUE, particularly for infill property. Because if you think about it, if you've got a 3,000 square foot R2 lot, say for ease of calculation, 30 by 100, right? You're taking off the first 300 square feet of a 3,000 square foot lot, or 10%, right? By the time you then do 5-foot setbacks on each side and a 15-foot setback from the sidewalk, you're shrinking it very significantly when you add 10 feet as well from the building footing and 3 feet from a property line. You're not left with much of anything. And so I understand, I totally understand, Kristen, your concept that we need to be equitable for everybody in affordability, but I think we do also have to weigh the sustainability against the cost of these kind of improvements. I won't know, I'll know after this next project what this actually cost us. But one other thing to remember on this is that if you're doing a stormwater facility, such as you're saying, most often you want to do it in the front of the lot because it's the easiest place with slope in case you do have to have run over to the weep hole. Once you have to put it in the back, into the backyard, you've got to run it from that much higher of a distance. So anyway, that's my comment, is just on the PUE particularly. I think it's, and then, the other thing is you'll see these stormwater facilities up College, you'll see them on Springbrook, and maintenance becomes a resounding issue for them if they're not naturally landscaped. So anyway, so that's my question and commentary, I guess, all at once. So my apologies.
Mayor, I felt like you were channeling our friend Leonard.
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah. But I think that is, and I know we've heard from other builders, as I'm sure you, Kristen, and Brett have, about stormwater treatment. And I think most of us Oregonians understand why we do it. But I will underscore one thing you said that I don't know all of us know, and I do want to underscore it, is up until, I don't know, it was probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I had no idea that, as you said, that the large majority of stormwater is not treated, right? Beyond what's treated on site, it goes straight to the river. And I did not know that until, 15 years ago or something. So, and I would venture to guess that most people in the community don't know that. They probably, as you said, believe that it's treated before it goes into the Willamette, but it's not. Right.
Yeah. So as part of the TMDL plan recently, one of the tasks that we had to do this year was to do a community survey to help figure out what our messaging needs to be better focused on. And so one of the questions we had was to folks to, where does the water go once it goes down the storm drain? And most people responded that they thought that it went to the wastewater treatment plant. So there's still a lot of education around our stormwater system and making people understand that, washing your car in your front lawn, in your front driveway, and all those suds that run down the curb line and go into a catch basin, all of that chemical matter ends up in our creeks. It's not treated. So.
Okay, well, thank you. Like I say, if there is a chance to look at that PUE, particularly for infill, And really, if we can weigh it against, like you said, sustainability versus affordability, versus the DEI, and really, unfortunately, these 5 goals of ours, they can sort of they have to be weighed at times to know, which one sort of takes precedent, or how do you share them, sort of.
Right. Yeah, and I think that there's certainly outreach that we can do to the utilities themselves about that space. When we go through the land use process, they are given the land use packets, and they are given the opportunity to provide comment on the application itself. And there are certainly cases that we've encountered, like instances that you've alluded to, where in an older part of town, the house has actually been built in that public utility easement. And so as part of that, when they review that land use application, instead of being able to dedicate 10 feet, maybe they only can dedicate 6 feet, because that's only the spaces that's available. And so those utilities, we hear back from Comcast saying, yep, that works, or maybe that doesn't, or PGE will make those comments as well. So I think that probably some outreach to those utilities, and really verifying with them the space that they need available. Like I said, generally our standard, and I think most city standards, is that 10-foot public utility easement, but I do know there are applications where we have had smaller dedication due to available space.
Yeah, I must admit, and this is the Habitat hat speaking, I wish I knew that before this project on 5th, that it was even a possibility, because the way it was presented to us was, nope, 10 feet solid, can't do it. And so, had you told me, well, Rick, you guys can do it 4 feet, or whatever it is, namely given the location of the other houses, but we did not know that. So we had to go back to the drawing board. So I think if there is some flexibility in that, that would be, I think, very helpful, not just obviously for Habitat, but for other builders, and particularly infill builders. That would be useful, because again, I think if we can do it without the concrete, it's better for everybody. So
I do want to maybe provide some clarity in what I said, and that the city allows for a smaller distance. So when I say that, that's how the condition may get written. However, in those instances, the applicant is responsible for reaching out and obtaining approval from those individual utilities for a reduced space. And once we receive confirmation from each one of those utilities that they agree, then we can allow for something below that 10 feet. But it becomes the applicant's responsibility to do that legwork to verify a reduced PUE is going to be workable in that individual location. So.
Okay, and maybe that was missed, but maybe that's something that should be known as well, because I think we would have probably, and again, this is anecdotal, but we probably would have chased that just because of what it required otherwise. So again, I think and I think that's also, this comes back to another one of our goals, obviously, and that's customer service, right?
Right.
And that's where, these are your customers, these builders. How do we try to get the thing done in the least painful way possible for everybody concerned? And I think that hits another goal. So
yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think you also have to look at it, the builder is the customer, but I think the citizen of Dundee or of Newberg is also the customer, right? And having that space available so that down the road someone can get, better communication services, better Wi-Fi, someone installs fiber optics. If we don't have space available for that, those sorts of things can't happen. So we have to balance sort of the customer being the developer, but also the customer being the residents. So,
but we also, and just the other side of that is we have to balance the fact that if it costs $5,000 more for someone who can barely afford that in order to put in a concrete treatment facility versus a depression in the ground, that may keep somebody from purchasing a home. So I think that's a part of it as well on the customer service side.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Anybody? Otherwise, great, awesome presentation. I really appreciate it, guys. That's just fantastic. So thank you. Anyone?
Really good.
Yeah, it was great. Any other comments, folks? Feel free.
I have a question, but not necessarily about this, but about water quality. Sonia and I used to do a We used to go with the middle school to do a whole day of water quality training for kids to help kids understand the importance and, you know, where their water goes. And one day I said to an adult, you know, the planet only came with so much water. Dinosaurs drank this water and he almost died from that. He had no idea that that was a thing, right? And I think we don't do a great job explaining that to people. Like, this is all we're getting, folks. We better do it right. But Sonia and I used to go and do that with the kids and talk to them about it and teach them about it and how it works and why it's important and all of those things from a, you know, because I believe if you want to change the world, you have to change a child, right? Yeah. Change their mind. So do we still do that?
We do.
Okay,
that
good.
That specific activity is not something we do, but I go over to George Fox and give presentations to their ecology class. We partner with an organization called Mad Science that does presentations, assembly presentations in our grade schools. I haven't been in a middle school since I've been here, but we are definitely doing outreach to, you know, our grade schools and George Fox. I know we've actually done, when Jay Harris was still here, we went up and I believe it was at C.S. Lewis. They had a project that came up where they developed this stormwater treatment system and they gave a presentation to Jay about that concept design and got feedback. So definitely a focus of ours is educating youth, because you're right. You know, Public Works Day, we've done some outreach as part of the library has like a summer STEM program. We've done projects there, and it's amazing. You are teaching kids, but you have parents that are like, huh, what? What was that?
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments, folks?
I one quick question. Chris, thank you. I echo Rick's comments of the incredibly informative presentation. Couple things that I questions around. One, you'd mentioned the example of folks, and I'm one of those folks that didn't know that the runoff just goes straight to the creeks. And so using as an example, being conscious of how and when and where we wash our cars, which makes sense. And I was wondering if you might offer for some of us and those watching and those who will watch other practical things that folks can do given the reality of our situation.
Yeah. So that's a really great question. And that is actually part of the whole reason we did that survey. So we asked people, you know, where do you put your leaves during the fall? You know, are you putting them out on the curb line? Where do you wash your car? Those sorts of things. So we have done educational messaging along the way with the feedback that we got as part of our TMDL survey. We will be doing more targeted focus, and we actually got you know, a bunch of people who took the survey who are interested in being involved and being more up to date. So we've got sort of some emails and hoping to develop a listserv and really connect that with Sustainable Newberg and putting that messaging out there about easy things that people can do to help impact and improve our stormwater and watershed. So
cool. So just maybe look out for more of those educational opportunities to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. The second thing, and I think your statement was really powerful towards the end, talking about the necessity of sitting in the tension between affordability and, you know, sustainability as pertains to our stormwater. And Rick, I'm super impressed by your knowledge of this area. It seems as though if I understood, you know, Kristen, what you're saying, and Rick, you as well, is that where it becomes a cost issue is that for the developers, they're ultimately having to pay more to install these stormwater treatment. I'm probably messing up the language.
No, you got it. Stormwater treatment facilities.
Woo! Learning. But then ultimately that cost ends up being pushed onto whoever the buyer is of that home. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right.
I think Rick can probably speak more to that. But yes, generally, yes, it does get passed along. So.
I see. So as of now, it seems as though the current practice is either A, that cost gets pushed onto the buyer because they are following protocol, or that doesn't end up happening, which ends up causing larger ecological issues. And again, you did a great job of tying it back to our rivers and our salmon and the original people of the land. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So, so oftentimes, unfortunately, stormwater, it can kind of be, butted up against affordable housing. And I think that, like what Brett was talking about at the end of the presentation, is we are in the process of updating our stormwater master plan. We're also in the process of going to be updating our design and construction standards. And through that process, I think that there is certainly an opportunity to find efficiencies. I think that we have, as I mentioned, there are efficiencies that exist out there. We have design and construction standards so that you don't have to hire an engineer. You can just go and kind of plug and play and figure out, that's a cost saving. That's a tremendous cost savings. You don't have to hire an engineer. But there are construction cost savings along the way as well that we can probably look at. And that just needs more time and energy. And I think we're at a point where we're going to be putting in that time and energy. So.
Sure. No, and it seems as though y'all are already putting in a lot of time. I think you actually beat me to, my question was if there might be other ways that we can still be responsible with our stormwater treatment while also not pushing the cost onto the residents. And I appreciate the work you've already done in providing those plans, for folks who are able and willing to take those plans and do their own thing. And be curious and excited to continue working with you all to think about what other options might be so that we aren't pushing the cost on and being responsible, because that seems important. And we can, think of different ideas, but thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Actually, it looks like I can't see everybody if you're raising your hand. So any other questions, folks?
Yeah, I just have a comment and a question. So first of all, Kristen, thank you for that presentation, especially from like a historical point of view and acknowledging the Kalapuya tribe. That's definitely something that we don't do enough. So thank you for that. The question I have is in terms of the education piece, is the outreach like being done for like the Latinx or Spanish speaking community since the beginning, or is that more of something that's been thought about more lately? I just want to make sure that this particularly, I didn't know much of what you presented today until I was looking through the slideshow and then with the information that you gave out. So I think this is really important piece to be educating the Latinx and Spanish speaking community on.
Yeah, great question. So I will say historically, I don't know that there has been as much outreach to the Hispanic and Latinx community. However, it is something that we are moving towards being more inclusive of that community. One of the items that I've been working on this year is we are going to be, as part of one of the requirements, one of those measurable goals out of our TMDL plan is to develop a watershed signage program, a stormwater and watershed signage program. And so I've been working with one of our interns these past several months on what that program looks like. And a lot of that signage is going to be bilingual. And so we are going to be providing that information so that we're better serving our community. And I think that will probably be one of the largest sort of steps forward as far as including that community in the stormwater and watershed conversation.
Okay, folks, any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, let's reconvene. Oh, just one housekeeping item just for when you ask or going to ask a question, please identify yourself if I don't identify you, just so that we know for those who might be listening. Same goes through a follow-on question. If you want to follow on, just run it by so that we know for those listening at home. So otherwise, again, Kristen and Brett, great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm real interested to hear what happens with the updated stormwater master plan and what y'all are working on. And so again, thank you. It's just a tick before 7. Why don't we reconvene at 7:10 for the business session this evening. And again, as always, folks, just mute yourself, stop your video, and we'll be back at 7:10. And Kristen and Brett and everyone else, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right, it is 7:10 by my watch. Let us get this City Council business session for October 5th, 2020 underway. This is the call to order. A roll call, please, Sue.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman.
Here.
Counselor Martinez Plancarte.
Present.
Counselor Cofield.
Present and accounted for.
Mayor Rogers.
Present.
Counselor Bacon.
Here.
And Counselor Finley is excused.
All right, next, the Pledge of Allegiance, and you see the flag on your screen. Here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty, well, thank you. And with that, let's roll right into item 4, the city manager's report, please. Dan?
Okay. For this report, I want to start with COVID. It seems like it's the topic, the ongoing topic du jour. It seems like more at the national level than it's ever been, but I wanted to talk a little bit more locally. Mask wearing. Mask wearing's been an ongoing challenge for all of us, I know, and has been an ongoing challenge, I think, for folks, as this is dragged out and onward. But wanted to highlight the fact that we are observing mask wearing within city facilities. We're trying to do that in order to keep the public, as a public health emergency, we're trying to keep the public and the broader public healthy. As well as our employees, so we can continue to provide service to residents and visitors. And I know that that's been a challenge in some cases. I think we've generally had respectful folks who will wear the masks within our facilities, but it's not always the case. And so I just wanted to point that out, that we do require or ask that masks be worn in conformance with the state, and we're trying to set a good example. We're trying to take care of visitors and employees so that we're able to continue to provide the amenities that we offer in the community. So just wanted to point that out. Again, I know it's hard because this has lasted for so long, and I think the inconvenience of mask wearing, I understand it's not always something we want to have to do, and certainly I look forward to the point where we don't have to do it. But for now, I just wanted to put out that reminder. Also related to COVID, we're working on CARES Act funding that's been allocated to the city. And this is the federal relief money. We still have a little bit that we are working on some arrangements, trying to find projects to fund, and working in concert right now with the school district and trying to come up with a project that can benefit both of us, given that we have teleworkers and a lot of community members who are teleworking, and trying to look for some projects there that might benefit those children in the community who are doing distance learning at home. So trying to find some mutual benefit with the remaining funds that we have. So optimistic there, but still working on the details. So I don't have a lot of update there, but that's our goal right now. Did want to also mention, I've given the council the update, was able to come to an agreement with an assistant city manager, which is an important position for the city. And so I'm excited to have Kezia Warner, who will start with us at the end of the month on the 26th, just in time for Halloween, maybe. Not that I'm recommending people go out and trick or treat, but in any event, we'll see what costume she wears to work. Not judging. Kezia comes from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, where she's been working the last 2 years as the deputy director overseeing their internal functions. So has some good experience in a broad range of internal functions. Prior to that, she actually had worked in a number of jobs with the city of Portland, with the the Portland Bureau of Transportation most recently as a division manager, where she managed a lot of the parking operations. So I imagine she has some good customer service skills working in an environment like that, where I don't think that you often get people on their best moment when you are giving them a citation. She's also worked for the Police Bureau and for the Portland City Budget Office. And so has a lot of experience, and we're looking forward to her starting, and I'm looking forward to pairing up some of my experience with hers and seeing what we can accomplish for the city. And I know she's excited to come to Newberg. This is one of the areas that she, I think, had long been kind of looking to move to. And I think that might be something she does is move this way. So we shall see, and hopefully all will work out well. The other position that we've been recruiting for is a public works director, and just wanted to provide a quick update there. Right now, we have interviews scheduled for Friday, the 9th, this Friday. We had selected 4 candidates as finalists. Unfortunately, due to one taking a position elsewhere and one having some family issues, we're down to 2 candidates. And so we'll proceed with the interviews and hopefully have some all-star candidates and some competition there between those 2, but we shall see how it goes. Also wanted to, in the broader customer service realm, mention for the umpteenth and probably not last time, the See-Click Fix app, which launched on 23rd of September, on Wednesday the 23rd. The app's available for any community member to download for your smartphone. It's available through app stores for whichever device you use. And it's an app that you can then take a photo with your phone, which will geolocate where the issue is that you're reporting, and you can report all manner of issues that we can help fix. And so the idea, you see it, you click the photo button, and we will come out, hopefully be able to fix it, or at least work to resolution there. And so far, I asked for a quick synopsis of what we've gotten. It's only been about 9 issues reported so far, which is, I think that, getting that message out that it exists into the community. And a couple of those I think are actually PGE issues. But realistically, we've had a couple traffic safety related things, storm swale, so our friends at Stormwater, something to look at, and code compliance, pothole in the street, those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's kind of what I would expect, but generally speaking, want to make sure that people know that it's there and are able to use it as a tool. Also wanted to let you all know the auditors are here. Not everybody's favorite thing, but I know it's an important task for us to go through that on an annual basis. And so this week is the annual site visit for our auditors. They should be wrapped up by Thursday. But we're hoping that based on what we've seen today, that it'll be a relatively smooth and painless process. And I think we always hope that. So hopefully it will meet our expectations. From there, staff and finance is going to work on the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and hope to have that wrapped up in December. So sort of the sequential nature of finance's calendar on kind of wrapping up this calendar year. 2 other quick things. I did have a kickoff meeting with ICLEI, and it is pronounced ICLEI. I confirmed that. So this is the sustainability group that we joined as part of our sustainability program goal from the City Council. So ICLEI as a member offers a number of member benefits, some of those being consultative services and also communication with other members. And so had a kickoff meeting there in order to reach out to them to find out what we got, sort of what we get as part of the membership cost, and then how to connect to those member groups. So they're sending information, and then the goal would be to start kicking off a greenhouse gas inventory of city facilities, sort of an internal focused effort. And I have had a couple conversations with PGE about getting energy use throughout the city. And so working in partnership with the resident-led sustainability group being able to get information there as well. So trying to get some baseline, as we've talked about in the past with council goals, get some baseline information to then move forward and move upward and go from the base to some other goals. So hopefully that will be fruitful, and we'll get started on that. And then the other item is the communication plan kickoff. I attended the kickoff meeting there. We've got a team that's going to be developing our overall communication strategies and a communication plan. And then in the future, that team or a different team possibly would morph into an ongoing management team of our communication efforts. And hopefully that'll feed really well into our customer service goals, into transparency and some of the other things that I think are going to make us a healthy organization and one that's responsive to our residents. So I'll leave it there, and that's kind of what we've been up to the last couple of weeks.
Awesome. Any questions for Dan, folks? Any news on the equity audit, or is that still out a bit?
We've gotten a request for the sort of the first raft of information, some of our HR data, and as we've talked about, unfortunately, it's a little slow in producing, but we're working on fulfilling the data requests. So it's going slowly, but it's starting, and so I think hopefully we'll go a little faster once we've gotten that information out of our systems, and then kind of go to the next step. So it's moving.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Dan, folks? All right, seeing none. All right, let's move on to council appointment. With your agreement, I would like to appoint Josh Duder, the current executive director of Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce, to the Ad Hoc Urban Renewal Citizens Advisory Committee for the term October 2020 to April 2021. And if someone would like to make a motion, that would be fantastic.
Okay, Mayor, I'll do it.
There we go. There we go.
Mayor, I'd like to approve your appointment of Josh Duder to the Urban Renewal Citizens Advisory Committee.
All right, thank you. And a second.
Second.
Yeah, that's Jules with a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your left hands or saying aye if you're not visible. All right, looks like we got everybody. All right, thank you. And Josh, if you're listening out there, thank you very much for both your willingness to serve at the Chamber of Commerce and for your willingness to join this very important, even more important now, with the sale of the mill with the Urban Renewal Authority. So there we go. All right. Do we have any public comments, Sue? Or anyone waiting to make public comment?
No.
No. Anything on the update for the issue tracker, Dan?
No updates.
No updates. All right, then. Moving right along, we're on to new business. And this is Taste Newberg's annual audit. So good evening, Leslie, Dennis, good evening, and Todd, good evening as well. So we're ready when you are.
Thank you, Mayor Rogers, council, and city staff. As part of Visit Newberg's contract with the city, we were required to perform an annual financial audit for our first full year of operation. We contracted with Hoffman, Stewart & Schmidt in Lake Oswego to perform this audit. The audit was presented to the Visit Newberg Board of Directors in August of 2020, at which time the 2019-2020 fiscal year financial statement audit results report was unanimously approved by the board. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Todd Massenger, CPA with Hoffman, Stewart & Schmidt, who will present a summary of his findings. Our board president, Dennis, is also present, and either he or I will be available for any questions afterwards. And please go ahead, Todd.
Okay, that's my cue. Hello, everyone. Everything Leslie said is true. I'm Todd Massenger with Hoffman, Stewart & Schmidt. And we performed the audit for Visit Newberg for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. We completed our audit work at the very beginning of August, presented to the organization's board of directors on August 10th, and finalized the audit. I thought I could summarize kind of the audit process with 3 basic points: the basis of accounting, the financial statements, and then our report on the financial statements. So this was the organization's first audit, and so some decisions were made in terms of what basis of accounting will we report our financial statements on? How will we keep our books? And so many of you maybe have heard of something called GAAP in the accounting world, generally accepted accounting principles, where we have accrual basis financial statements. It seemed like in discussion with management that really wasn't going to serve the best purpose for Visit Newberg. And so the cash basis of accounting was selected. So the cash basis is not in accordance with US GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, but it is very commonly used. It's sort of like called an other comprehensive basis of accounting. It's very appropriate for smaller organizations. And in this case also for Visit Newberg, it really does help them line up their financial reporting with how they budget. So it made the most sense for the organization to be on the cash basis of accounting. And so as such, transitioning to my second point here, the financial statement that is issued really is just one financial statement with some footnotes to that financial statement. And that is a statement of cash receipts and disbursements. And so in the audited financials that were issued, it's that statement, which essentially shows cash receipts during the fiscal year, which totaled $484,000, primarily from the transit lodging tax. I think all but about $15,000 of that amount was from that. It shows cash disbursements broken down by category. And then it just simply shows the surplus in cash for the period, a beginning total for cash at the beginning of the fiscal year, cash and certificates of deposit, and an ending total for the year. I suspect you've seen those numbers. They are as of June 30th, 2020. So our job then in conducting the audit is to report on these financial statements, and that is to go in and perform audit tests of the amounts that are reported. We do that in a variety of ways, and then conclude at the end of our audit work as to whether or not this financial statement is in fact fairly presented, fairly stated in accordance with the cash basis of accounting. And so that's exactly what our audit report says, that based on the audit work that we performed, the financial statement for Visit Newberg is in fact fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with cash basis of accounting. So that's certainly what you're hoping for, what you're looking for from your audit firm when you hire the firm to conduct an audit. We also have some responsibility in an audit to evaluate or look at the organization's internal controls. And by that I mean the systems and the processes and policies that are in place at the organization to make sure that accurate financial statements can be generated and that financial assets are safeguarded. We don't go so far in an audit as to express an opinion on those controls in a report. However, if we came across circumstances in our discussions with management and the test work that we performed that led us to believe that one of those two objectives was compromised, so the two objectives being accurate financial reporting, safeguarding of assets, then we would have some responsibility to report to the board those items as deficiencies in internal control, either classified as material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And we had none of those to report as part of our audit. So it was a smooth sailing audit process for Visit Oregon. I'm happy to answer any questions or.
All right, questions, folks? All right, I guess I have a question or two, I guess. Todd, do you normally present a management letter with this type of an audit or not?
We didn't have a management letter. We do have a communication with those charged with governance that we did go through with the board. Really, it's a fairly boilerplate letter when the audit is smooth. And so it is fairly boilerplate. It talks about things like, did we have difficulties performing the audit? Did we have disagreements with management during the course of our audit? Was there anything recorded in the financial statements that in our view was particularly sensitive or maybe an overly aggressive estimate? Things like that. So that letter was issued, but there was nothing in there that I would say is notable.
Okay, thank you. And then to follow on, is there any thought of going to accrual in future years, or is it going to stick with cash basis?
Well, that would be the organization's decision. I think for this first year, certainly for a number of reasons, like I said, the cash basis seemed to make the most sense.
And then the final question, I guess, is, and again, I'm showing my nonprofit background, I guess, but management in general shows at 25% of total costs, which I think is traditionally high. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you talk to on that. So there's some watchdog agencies out there. The Better Business Bureau has its Wise Giving Alliance.
Right.
And it suggests that program service expense as a percent of total should be 65% or higher for an organization to sort of get their approval rating. And so that's kind of the one that I look at when I talk to clients. And so
yeah,
Newberg is higher than that.
That is interesting because I've always heard a benchmark of 15% not to exceed, but yeah, okay, but thank you. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Any other questions, folks? All right, awesome, great. It's a clean audit that says presents fairly in all material respects. That's what we like to see. Awesome. So thank you, Todd, Leslie, Dennis. Thank you all. Thanks very much. Thank you for all your good works.
You're welcome.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 7B.
No, Mr. Mayor, in the RCA, there is a request for a motion that you accept the audit.
Oh, there is. Okay, let's accept that audit then, folks. We need a motion.
Motion to accept the 2019-2020 Visit Newberg annual audit.
Second.
And Elise with a second. All right, any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your left hand. Okay. All right, approved. There it is. Now I can formally thank you all. Thank you, Leslie and Dennis again. Todd, thank you all. All right, now we can move on to item 7B, Resolution 2020-3700, Employee Handbook Changes. And I think that's you, Dan.
It is me. This is an interesting one because this is sort of the updates and improvements to our employee manual that was, I guess, significantly updated in what sounded like to be an extensive process that lasted quite a while before my time and was updated before my time. So, I think we're offering two appendices, one for update and one for addition, Appendix B, and then an addition of Appendix J to the document. B, which is reflective of some state law changes, the Oregon Workplace Fairness Act, which went into effect, I believe, on the 1st of October. And then we have some requirement from our insurer, City County Insurance, CIS, that if we have, which we do, pay for excess cybersecurity coverage, that we have a requirement to have a cybersecurity policy. And so that is the Appendix J. And I think generally speaking, in terms of the Appendix B changes or amendments, they're relatively light and really focus on compliance with the Workplace Fairness Act. And so speaking of that, really kind of talk about process for employees to report prohibited conduct, who to report the conduct to, and we generally use a chain of command, and so it sort of goes to the HR director and department head or supervisors, those kinds of things, and escalates from there. We've got in here as well, as far as what the new law requires in said policy, that the employee is, I guess, a statement that an employee who pursues legal action on an alleged conduct that is prohibited by the state employment laws has 5-year window to do so after the occurrence of the violation. And again, that's compliance with the state law. Includes that the employer has not or may not coerce an employee into entering a non-disclosure or non-disparagement agreement, an NDA, and those kinds of agreements. And then let's see, an explanation that an employee is claiming to be aggrieved or having been subject to either discrimination, discriminatory behavior, other behaviors that are called out in here as no-nos, legal term there, no-nos. But, essentially calls out that the employee has at least 7 days to revoke the agreement after signing it if there was a separation or those kinds of things. And then let's see, the last part is that the statement that it advises employers and employees to document any incidents. And so, that is generally what we try to do. Obviously, I won't speak to past history, but I know that it has not always been done tremendously well, but this calls out exactly what will be required, and employees will be provided all this, both B and J, sorry, both of those appendices once they're approved. And so given that the council has the oversight of said employee handbook and all of that, I guess this is the formal process to bring this forward for inclusion and update.
All right, questions for Dan, comments? Okay.
Quick question, and I'm just looking over my notes. One small thing I think I saw on page, well, of course, I'm not going to be able to find it now. This is talking about the procedure complaint. Again, really small thing, talks about any employee who observes any conduct that he or she believes in shifting to they, them language could work. I don't know if that's common in other spaces, but yeah, I think that could be a more inclusive way of speaking to folks who would, want to submit some sort of complaint or follow that procedure, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
We could definitely go through and update the language if there are not the right pronouns and those kinds of things. And certainly I think that makes sense to be more inclusive as we're adopting any policies. I think that's part of, or should be part of, our equity assessment, that we're doing that broadly. And so why adopt something new that doesn't have said language? That totally makes sense. And I think there were a couple of minor typos. I know Councilor Bacon found one in the Appendix B. So we'll go through and make sure we clean up any of those if they were conveyed to you all. And so, yes, we can totally improve pronouns.
Awesome, thank you. The second one was again more of a question. In the paragraph right above that says employees are strongly encouraged to tell the harasser that the behavior is offensive and unwanted and that they should stop. Part of me, again, that makes sense, and I trust our HR folks if that's common practice. I do wonder though about certain situations where it may be unsafe for an employee to do that. So again, if it is best practice and we're seeing this in other areas and that's the language used, I'll defer to folks who are wiser than I am. But that is just something that initially comes to mind, or instances where it may not be safe. So we might not want to strongly encourage everyone if the situation is unsafe for the person to do so.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think that, take this for what it is, that it's a general overarching best practice kind of thing, and the best practice of kind of giving someone who, is I guess almost giving them the benefit of the doubt of saying like, look, this is not okay to me, this is offensive to me, this is hurtful, whatever it ends up being, the behavior, calling that out and at least having that be apparent to them, and be something that they're aware of is generally the best practice. And then certainly would not want to put anybody, it's not required that you do that, but it certainly is helpful so that that person isn't later, I had no idea. But I certainly, when it's unsafe, that's why we have an escalation procedure as well, and other ways to handle it. So it's not a one and only, but certainly is generally the better practice to inform the person of offensive behavior.
That makes sense. And my last question is around processes. So there is a comment that talks about confidentiality. I'm wondering, do we currently have any processes in place where folks could submit some sort of report that may not directly involve them? So if they witness someone else, because a lot of this language is around if something happens to you, report to your supervisor, report to the director of HR. But if you are a bystander, do we have something in place?
You know, it's a good catch, and I'm not sure that it's well called out here. And certainly, I think we expect employees to report behavior that they see that isn't in compliance with our standards. But obviously, also, I think then that requires us to have a standard. And I know we've talked about that, honestly, in my time here, is making sure that we're really clear about what our standards for behavior are, for customer service, for some of those things, so we can then have conversations with staff that are more constructive. If you have a standard and it's clear, you can obviously call out when someone doesn't meet it. And, so I'm not sure that it's real clear in here, and we can add something that is maybe clearer that we encourage people to report. And then it may not always come to HR, I guess, right? It depends on the type of behavior. There could be a safety related issue that would not need to go to HR, it would go to someone else. But that seems like a good thing to encourage overtly our staff to do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, folks? All right, and then how do you want to do this, Dan? Do you want us to give you a motion with the suggested changes, or do you want to bring it back to us?
I think actually I'd look to Mr. Stone there on that one, as far as, if it's allowable for us to clean them up, or if it makes better sense to come back with, we can do a red line version and, just show off the various points we made changes. And that might be a consent item even possibly, I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. Truman Stone, City Attorney. We do have some time pressures to get this adopted. One, we're already a couple days past the deadline from the Oregon statute that was adopted that set a October 1 implementation date. And then we also have been working on this cyber security policy, and it needs to be in place so we can get our excess cyber liability insurance policy in place. And we've been working with our insurance company, and they've gave us an earlier deadline that they've extended. So we really kind of need to move on this tonight. In this process, the HR director and I, in going through this, noticed quite a few typos, some punctuation issues and that. And then also there are, if you remember, this personnel manual was adopted last year as kind of a new personnel manual based on a model provided to the city. We've, in living with it with a year experience now, we've seen some of the gap areas that need filling in, some things that need some clarity. So I fully anticipate that we'll be back in front of the council in short to mid future with additional revisions. I think there's an intent to get the new assistant city manager on board and involved in that process. So if you can overlook a few typos and see your way to pass this tonight, staff can promise that we'll be back with those fixed at a future date.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Any further discussion, any further questions, folks? Okay, how's about a motion?
Motion to approve resolution 2020-3700, employee handbook changes.
And do you want us to state in this, Truman, with the suggested changes?
Gotta remember to unmute myself. Perhaps you could say with the understanding that this will return to the council at a future date with fixing of identified typographic errors.
Okay, great, thank you. Does that work for you, Bryce?
Yes, again, sorry, this is Bryce Cofield speaking for those listening. I motion to approve resolution 2020-3700 employee handbook changes with the expectation that it returns with typographical changes, amongst other things.
Nicely done. And a second?
Mrs. Jules with a second.
Thank you, Jules. All right, any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your left hand. All right, look like you got it. It passes. All right, moving along. Next item, council committee reports. Anything to report out, folks? No? All right, I will give you a brief summary. Newberg Downtown Coalition this morning, it was a good chance to sort of re-emphasize and provide a bit more information on the sale of the mill and thus the Urban Renewal Authority. So that is good. So the word is out, and that was nice to be able to share good news. So that was a good thing. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Mayor Hill from McMinnville and Dave Hageberg to talk about the bypass. Dave and Mayor Hill wants to talk about it. I'm not sure exactly what, but I think they have word that most of the ODOT has the money to make all the acquisition on Rex Hill. And I think that's what they're going to be talking about tomorrow. Elise and I are going on a field trip to see some housing, the Veterans Village in Clackamas on Wednesday. Equity Task Force meets on Thursday. Hopefully at that point we will start to schedule some listening sessions and get our consultants lined up to facilitate that. And then the community partners call is Friday afternoon. We do that every 2 weeks now. And then the last one I've got here is the community court fourth meeting will be on October 15th, trying to get that up and off the ground. So, which is exciting as well. Yep, it's exciting as well. So that's what I got. Anything else, anyone? All right. One other thing, circling back to the city manager's report and the reminder on masks. Here's the story. This morning, I woke up, talked to Lisa, and she said, "What's your schedule like this week?" And I said, "Well, I got meetings and meetings." She goes, "How many of those meetings are in person?" And oddly enough, 4 of them were scheduled to be in person. And Lisa looked at me very sternly and said, "No, you are not meeting in person. No, you are going to meet, if you meet, over these things with masks on." I think I too was getting, so here's true admission, I was getting lax. I was starting to think meeting in person is kind of a good thing. But, be mindful of what our city manager said. Listen to your city manager, all of you. So anyway, that's what I got. Anything else for the good of the order?
Actually, this is just a plug for the Community Wellness Collective is launching our new website and working really closely with different community organizations to try to make it a completely collaborative, collective launch. And so tomorrow we have our user agents. So Unidos, Virginia Garcia, CCO, all of us are getting together, HHS, getting together and going to try to perfect all of the resources, which is super exciting. We got approved for translation. I'm so excited. So really hoping that our city can plug it because it's like this beautiful tool that you can use on your phone. The chief is going to have his officers trained on how to use it on their city-run phones if we can get IT to approve it, which we're hopeful about. So just really awesome way for people to get connected to resources in our area. And I think that it's going to be really important as we see the ramifications of COVID.
Nice, nice. Good stuff. Very nice. All right. Anything else, folks? All right. All right. Dan, Truman, right? Who else do I see? Anyway, it's Bryce, Jules, Elise, Denise, right? Sue, Doug, and everybody else listening. Thank you, and keep up the good work, right? You know, and we'll see you, if not before, we will see you at least in video, and I make sure I tell Lisa that 2 weeks from today. So, all right, have a nice evening, and for anybody who's counting, it's 7:50. Sleep well.
Good to see everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody. Good to see you. Take care.